We are live, Prasad.
Yeah, all right. Thanks a lot, Joel. Uh, Hi, and welcome to Seek Conversation series for Monsoon 2023. I'm Prasad Khanolkar. So I'm assistant professor at SEA, and which is the School of Environment and Architecture, and I'm moderating the Monsoon series titled To Inhabit with Care. This conversation series is organized by Sea City, which is an institutional extension of the School of Environment and Architecture. It was conceived as a public platform for dialogue on architectural, social, and cultural issues pertaining particularly to the spatial environment that we produce as well as inhabit. The Sea Conversation series was started in 2014, wherein every semester we curate, a Sea Conversation, which is a fortnightly public lecture series, and it's curated around a specific theme that resonates with our current times. So for Monsoon 2023, we decided to curate it around the theme of care. And hence the title To Inhabit with Care. The conversation series is sort of a response, a situated response to the current context where everything seems very uncertain, and uncertain in terms of the challenges of climate change, in terms of sort of this erasure of social security systems for a majority of people, the constant recurrent of pandemics, the proliferation of capital, but also the financializations of lands and lives. And within this kind of a context, we were thinking about interrogating, but also speculating on the concept of care. And the idea of care is not the way in which it is conceived, particularly within the health industry or in the medical industry, where the notion of care is either medicalized or financialized. But the idea was how do we think about or rethink largely care, but also think about methods of engaging with others with some sort of care. So that was sort of thought that was put behind curating this Monsoon series around the notion of care. I also want to acknowledge that this series is organized by Sea City and is partially funded by the Urban Center Mumbai. So Urban Center, which was established in 2020, is a node for dialogue and ideation, as well as to carry out research in the area of sustainable urban development. This is, I think, the sixth Seek Conversation. And today we have Eliana Sánchez-Aldana. So thanks for joining us, Eliana.
Thank you for inviting me.
So Eliana is a designer, weaver, and researcher from Bogota. She has a sort of academic background in design and art and textile management, as well as a PhD in humanities and social sciences from the National University of Colombia. Her work, and currently she's teaching as an associate professor at the Faculty of Architecture and Design at the University of Los Andes in Colombia. She's also the regional editor for the journal Textile, Cloth and Culture. So her work, I've been reading about it, and it's is around or sort of mediated through textiles largely. So her work researches and makes textiles, but textile as particular ways of thinking, as these touch technologies that are experienced through the body, but also the process of weaving as something that transforms, those who are making textile. Her work, both in terms of, producing textile, but also collaborating with others in producing textile or making textile, it is largely sort of also oriented towards creating spaces or collective spaces for creation and material discussion in which textile making is the protagonist. So I'll once again, thanks Eliana for joining us. And we're excited to hear you talk about your work and engage with it. So I'll hand it over to you. So just to discuss the format, so that, so Eliana will talk about her work for around 35 to 40 minutes, and then we'll open it up for question and answers and for discussion. So for those of you who are attending here, please, write your questions, or if you have any comments in the question and answer sections. Those who are on YouTube can post them comments, and we sort of bring them into the conversation. So I'll hand it over to you, Eliana. Thanks again. So I'll disappear for a while and I'll come back after the talk. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Prasad. Good morning, everyone. Since it is 7 a.m. in Bogota, where I'm from, where I'm based right now. I'm Eliana Sánchez-Aldana, as Prasad introduced me, and then I like to introduce myself as a weaver, as a textile maker, as a designer too. And I'm very excited about being part of the Mumbai SEACONVERSATIONS. I would like to thank also the School of Environment and Architecture for the invitation and for the space to share my work. And I like to address a small matter that I actually noticed, and one of my students actually was who noticed it on the event poster, and upon a careful review of the details, I realized that I had overlooked a very common mistake that I deeply regret. The poster says Colombia, but I'm from Colombia. Colombia is a different place. And yes, we are in different parts of the world, and said we are connected. The power of technology has brought us together to discuss different ways of inhabiting with care. And as you can see, I'm going to share my presentation, and you will see in a few seconds. The name of my talk is starts with one crossed out word. As you can see, thinking is crossed out, and instead of inviting you to think, I want to invite you to feel, to sense. And it is also about how technology has the power of connecting afar worlds, or at least apparently or physically afar worlds. So the title of my talk is Sensing Reconciliation Meanings Through Textiles, Colors, Textures, and Sounds. This is part of the project Mending the New, frame of reconciliation through testimony of digital textiles in the transition of post-conflict, rural post-conflict in Colombia. I will first contextualize the project from which the exhibition that you are seeing is created. And then I will go into some details of the collection of digital testimonial textiles. So let's start. Between 2018 and 2020, this project developed a framework for reconciliation with communities which have been crafting textiles and have been severely affected by the Colombian armed conflict. Rather than just documenting memories of war, textile crafting generates spaces of common reflection and has a healing, restorative, and constructive potential that negotiates memory and reconciliation. It is specifically this dimension of textile crafting that this project was designed to highlight. It is not a new practice. It has been part of many communities and collectives, especially women collectives, denouncing and facing war affectations. So we accept this call to research and what textile crafting offers to gather reconciliation meanings apart from the institutionalized discourses, apart from the top-down dynamics, in a context that brings together everyday practices, the realities of the conflict, the possibility of healing, and the rebuilding of social fabric towards a post-conflict society. Mending the New it was a project funded by Ukraine and Newton and an alliance between some UK universities and the Ministry of Sciences in Colombia. And I said it was between 2018 and 2020. But textile practices as a medium to tell the pain of the war was nothing new, as I mentioned, because, for instance, Chilean women during the dictatorship and enslaved Afro women and also Colombian textile collectives have embroidered the essential matters as a political medium to denounce and document their pain. So they have used textiles before. Textile crafting is deeply embedded in the life of the selected rural communities. It is an open practice, always in the making and adapting to the local condition of the communities and the material used. Textile crafting has the unique capacity to generate on a daily basis new configuration between the textile materials, the bodies that come into interaction with them, and the broader environment in which they are embedded. This means that as a knowledge-making practice, textile crafting is embedded into carrying practices, situationally responding to the local context and showing how armed conflict, Colombian armed conflict in this case, has been experienced and negotiated differently by communities that have experienced war directly. It is an example of autonomous design, as Arturo Escobar has labeled it. So the picture we see Olga, Blanca, Virgelina, and Maria Ruth. They are part of the collective Tejedoras por la Memoria de Monsoon. If I translate the word tejedoras, it will mean weaver or knitters, but they are textile makers, they're embroiderers, they textile makers, they crochet, they sew some of them, and they have done so during several years in Monsoon, Antioquia, one part in Colombia, one place in Colombia. So in 2000, we had the privilege of working with this collective. There are 4 of them, but there are many more. Tejedores por la Memoria Monsoon in 2016. And we reflected on how textiles accompanied and documented the conflict's impact on everyday life. And it was just before the peace agreement that we worked with them. So the peace process started in 2012, and the peace agreement signed in 2016. So after 5 decades of war, as the text, as the New York Times titled it, we signed an agreement, and there were lots of hope around it, but also lots of conflict and lots of truth coming into the light, you know. And the actors of the Colombian armed conflict, victims and armed actors, were called upon to reconcile. So that very year, the word reconciliation started to be a big thing to think about. But what does it mean to reconcile? That is something that is easy to say, but what reconciliation entails, it is not an easy task. And then governmental institutions and churches spread their own reconciliation meanings, top-down meanings. And those were often abstract and distant. It is about forgiveness, forgiving those who have hurt us, but easy said than done. Or it also might be something fundamental to the state's stable subsistence, as the peace policies stated. We move away from asking about affectation of the conflict, because it was the past, apparently, because it's not what happened, to ask about reconciliation, something new or apparently new. But it was damaged already because it wasn't easy. Something that needed our hands to get fixed, or in textile word, in actions, it needed to be mended. We moved away from asking about the affectation of the conflict, as I said. We then moved towards the future somehow. After the peace process agreement was signed, women in the collectives continued crafting their stories. They were aimed and reflect on efforts for the construction of the future within reconciliation. So in this setting, we invited these 4 textile collectives. This is Colombia, so in 4 different places in Colombia. These 4 places were deeply affected for the Colombian conflict, during the Colombian conflict. And one was placed in the north, Mampujan, and there are Mujeres Tejiendo Sueños y Sabores de Paz. Bojayá, Artesanías Guayacán, Quibdó, Artesanías Choibá, and Sonsón, Tejedoras por la Memoria y la Vida. So, as I mentioned, we decided to look for some bottom-up approach and meanings. And in Remendar lo Nuevo, Mending the New, we together proposed to lean on textile practices to rethink reconciliation. Textile practices have become communal autonomous design spaces in which they share their daily life. Here, textile had become part of their repertoire to construct collective memories. Their practice has become a way to transform themselves using their own resources. These women collectives, through textile crafts, have recounted their past, denounced their victimizers, and claimed for justice. leaving a testimony of what the war has meant in their lives. How could textile pieces help us think about new and future scenarios for reconciliation in a collective and multi-situated way? And we were 7 universities, actually, there is one missing here. The National University of Colombia, La Universidad de los Andes, where I'm also working, and Universidad de Antioquia, and 3 universities, and La Universidad Militar. And 3 universities in the UK, Lancaster University, Warwick, and Nottingham, University of Nottingham. But I'm not the only one in this project. That is one thing to say that is important. And we were many working on this, trying to rethink and find these different on material meanings of reconciliation. So we formed a transdisciplinary team. We had designers, we have social scientists and engineers, and jointly with women of the collectives, we decided to craft dialogues between textile and digital materialities among different technologies, as textiles are also one. We already knew the power of textiles thanks to the textile collectives productions, and we were aware of the capacity of digital technologies to bring people together while physically distant, amplifying their voices and emotions through the transformation of languages or digital components. So this is a team that we formed. We all gather around the word reconciliation, the meanings of reconciliation, textiles, design, social sciences, and digital components as a way of crafting together. And we also invited some people out of the collectives. We made up something that we called, and many authors called, living labs, as places to produce material discussions. During these encounters, fed by their own experience, and also we had the visit of one of of 2 of the women of the collectives. These women requested us to be heard. They claim listening in which the desires and voices of marginalized communities of rural areas in Colombia were made visible, were made loud. Therefore, we consider that digital materialities can collaborate to amplify these collective textile messages, senses, concepts, and metaphors about what it is and how reconciliation is made, creating a call to sentir pensar, which means to read things intuitively with the body, with the heart, and with the mind. It means think and sense, sentir pensar, sense and think, sorry. We invited teachers and students from our 3 universities to listen to what the textile collectives had to say, as I mentioned. We asked them to feel and make together. And we also wanted to engage some communities that perhaps thought that they were out of the conflict and that consider themselves as distant from the reality of many of these communities. But because we live in Bogota, the center of Colombia, the capital, and sometimes we felt that nothing can touch us. Actually, we kind of live in a bubble. But we needed to engage some other communities, some other audiences to take reconciliation and the peace agreement also as their own responsibility. And when we started working, we always, as part of this transdisciplinary place of thinking together, the field work was always bringing some material provocation, let's call it. So we, like from the field work, we were always working social sciences, design and engineering in participatory processes to think together, to make together, to discuss. And we included women as part of the design process. First, we used a digital textile prototype to provoke conversation and to discuss material meanings around connections, for instance. And as you see in the picture, two women from MONSOON, they were testing this first textile provocation prototype. This prototype one used conductance as a physical metaphor of collective action. We wanted to explore material contacts among and between people, and to investigate the ways in which a digital textile materially represents how reconciliation is a personal act that can fit collective action. This digital textile consisted of a surface, woven surface with cotton threads and copper strings as the input, a series of LEDs embed into the surface as a visual output, and a microcontroller that connected to both. And then as more people joined the connection by holding hands of the person that was directly in contact with the digital textile, with the prototype, the capacitance increased and LEDs lit up. One or two people alone were not enough to turn on the LEDs. This prototype allowed us to make the lighting of the LEDs a collective action that resulted from the metaphorical sum of the energy of the participants. This material lit reflection served as our way to bring the body into a corporal discussion regarding reconciliation. And this was also about, as I mentioned, making connection, thinking together. And collectives got connected first from afar, as you see in the picture down, because we decided some artifacts, also digital artifacts, textile digital artifacts, to allow and to invite women to send messages, seeds, stories, to exchange what they have around, their recipes, their landscapes, with the other collectives. And of course, they also share the tough stories. So first they were connected from afar, but then they had we decided also a physical encounter for them to meet. And this is part of what we got about the different ways to approach reconciliation. So in one of the workshops, we explored different ways to approach reconciliation meanings, and we ask, what does reconciliation smell like? What does it taste like? What does reconciliation sound like? What is its texture? So we have the first question, as I said, was in this case, the question was, what does reconciliation taste like? And they said that they know. They said, I'm gonna just read. We know it doesn't taste good, depending on their offense. It is bitter, but with time, wounds can be mended. Then it can be like chocolate, they said. Cocoa is bitter, and then with time and work, it can become sweet. And to the question about the texture that reconciliation has, they said, what is the texture of reconciliation? So for us, reconciliation has a hard texture, like the shell of a turtle. In other words, you want to break down the barriers, but you can't because there have been too many affectations. But also, as turtles, they walk slowly, but get to a different place with time. So thinking about reconciliation from sensorial approach helped us to realize that reconciliation is not set. The meaning of reconciliation is not set. It's a changing thing. Is an action, and it's a process, and it can change, but it takes time. And and reconciliation for sure needs effort. So it is more about knowing that is not a simple and a basic thing, but it's something that is complex and call us to bear with it, to find ways to inhabit, to dwell, to be part of a process that sometimes is not short. So in one of the living labs in Bogota, one of the groups explored how to materialize one of the important requests that women from the collectives made to us. As I mentioned, they wanted to be heard. And one of the teams proposed an experience where when the one who wants to hear has to embroider a speaker. So it was about the effort and the time that you have to invest in reconciliation, in listening to the stories part of the Colombian conflict. And so using conductive wire should shaping a spiral, as you are saying, over fabric, we decided to make a speaker. The spiral behaves as an electromagnet that induces a magnetic field when a variable electrical current flows through it. And a connection, the wire to the fabric, and if you connect it to an amplified audio source, it becomes a speaker. So this is a textile speaker. And once we had this, and also going through what they wanted us to, the collectives, I mean the textile collectives wanted us to work with, to design with, we also invited collectives to make their own, and that was actually what they did. So we invited them to embroider the speakers, but they also they were amazed by the magic of the simple digital device that was also textile, and that they could actually make, and they made it their own. So they embroider, they use their traditional textile techniques, and we invited them, we sent them a message. So they had to embroider up these kind of speakers to be able to listen to what we sent to them. And this is one of the women from Bojaya Collective, Artesanías Guayacán, using her textile speaker. And also there is one textile speaker made in Mampujan. So the spiral was an important thing within our work, within the project. And we arrived to several products in our project. We didn't. I mean, besides the speakers and the textile testimonial digital pieces that we were making, we produced, and I'm going to show you in the next slide, several products actually that we didn't expect it, but working with them, we realized that they were important. So this is one of the embroidered buttons that we ask or we invite visitors to make as a message of confirming that they have listened to the message, because that is an important part of listening, to make aware the ones that are sending the message that they were actually listening. So this is the abstraction of the spiral that we were working with, but it's a digital one. And so we have, if you go to the website at the end of the presentation, I will share with you the link. We have some notes and some graphic design infographics, and the story of the conflict and the story of our work, the field work is also there, and we share it. We have lots of events, conferences, exhibitions, workshops. We also have some soundscapes from the places where we were working with, from the places from the collectives of, and we have some testimonial textile repository too. We have the exhibition Times to Listen, and we also have an ebook. And this is the first idea that you will have about the exhibition. And this is also about since we were like when the project ended, we were under lockdown, so we also designed a digital version of the exhibition, and it's amazing because we also are able now to share with many people around the world, and their messages can go actually further. So the Times to Listen is a collection of asynchronous experiences that was developed as a collection of testimonial digital textiles that produce different listening experiences of situated messages about reconciliation. The experiences seek to involve corporeity in the willingness and action of listening. These pieces had been originally hand embroidered by the textile collectives involved with the project and part of the project, and they were intervened by the Governmental Nuevo team, by the Mending the new team, adding a digital layer. Additionally, in workshops given in the context of the project, small textile patches and audio recordings were developed as material responses to the embroideries and the sound messages. So if you see all the behind of the textile pieces, all those are speakers that were embroidered from people in different workshops in Bogota, in Medellin, in Cali, big cities in Colombia, that were part of other audiences telling the communities that they were listening to them. So these patches activate each piece in different ways in order to produce particular experiences of listening. To experience the stories, participants had to interact with the pieces through the senses. They had to touch, go around, observe carefully, take the time to go through and pay attention to the sound changes that were generated in the interaction. Each piece required a different kind of effort, a different amount of time to connect with the message. But to talk about the pieces would take away the experience from you. So I invite you to go to the website and see this version of the exhibition and experience by yourself. I'm gonna also I'm just gonna show you just a bit of what it is. So the times to listen, los tiempos de la escucha, is also in English, so you're very welcome, and we hope that you can go to it. It's an exhibition that invites us to connect with 4 textile collectives made up of women who have suffered the experience of the war in Colombia, along with their feelings and testimonies regarding the question, what shapes can reconciliation take? So here you will find each collective, their story, some important data about the population and the affectation of the Colombian armed conflict. We have also a conflict timeline, the characterization of the conflict too, the different armed groups that were actors that had presence in the territory. Some other textile pieces that they had embroidered or made before, and here is one of the, hopefully it work. No, it's not. Of the videos of the pieces. Well, this is voice ensemble, and this is the embroidered piece crafted by Artesanías Guayacán. So if you go, oh, it's not.
¿Recuerdas por qué el Sauco?
Can you
¿Recuerdas por
see what I'm?
También
porque
tuvimos en cuenta
Yes, we can.
utilizar un regalo que nos mandaron
So if you go,
de Inglaterra, que fue luego que se dibujó el croquis del atrato. ¿Sí?
Y cuéntenle.
so I'm just gonna leave it here, and I'm just want to invite you to experience it by yourself, to go through the website, to go through the times to listen, and to actually take the time to listen to what they have to say, they want to say, that they want to share about reconciliation meanings. Yeah, thank you very much.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Can you can you add the link of the exhibition to
sure.
the, yeah. So that I can-
So I'm gonna paste. There you go.
Thanks so much, Eliana, for the talk.
Mhm.
Just before I, ask or maybe open up, some of what you've spoken about. So I just wanted to tell those who are attending, if you have any questions, post them in the Q&A box, and I'll take them in that order. For those of you who are on YouTube, you can post them in the comment sections and we can bring them into the conversation. Even if anyone wants to join in the conversation, raise your hand and I can ask Joel to add you. Okay. I mean, I do have a lot of questions, Eliana. Thanks so much for sharing.
Please.
Can you actually just tell us a bit about the collectives that is there a specific history of these collectives that exists in Colombia, and the decision to work with them, if it emerges from that kind of a historical perspective also?
Sorry, I can't hear you very well. Can you please?
If there is a particular history to these collective, to these women's so just to get a sense of, so what is the history of these weaver collectives?
Yeah, sure. So we can. I'm just gonna if I can try to do this also. I think it's easier if we do this. For instance, Guayacan crafts, artesanías Guayacan, they are Afro and indigenous women. They live in the Pacific coast of Colombia, and they were victims of the Colombian conflict. You will have some dates, like precise dates here. And they, I mean, most of these collectives were formed or they follow the call of some religious groups, and they help them to form the collectivity and to make the group. And they used textiles as a way of making memory and denouncing things in the Colombian conflict before. So they were direct victims of the conflict. But sometimes it's quite difficult to say. Let's find.
So this have emerged along with the conflict, is it?
Yes, they are. So these are women dreams and flavors of peace. Mujeres tejiendo sueños y sabores de paz. They are from Mampujan, north of Colombia. They were also deeply affected by the conflict. So we have also Tejedoras por la Memoria de Asunción, Weavers of Memory of Asunción. They are kind of in the mountains of Colombia. They also were, they started the meetings, the gatherings after the Victims Association. So it was also a call for the victims. But textiles were always with them, and sometimes they knew how to embroider, they knew how to sew. I mean, textiles is a feminized craft. So they were taught textile making during the school time, or in their houses, you know, their moms or their grandmothers, they taught them. So they knew how to knit, or they knew how to embroider, but it was something that they had in common. And then they found this as a language to use it to tell the story, their own story in the conflict. So sometimes if you see some of the pieces, this one part maybe, they are beautiful, but the things that they tell are very, very hard. So this is also this ambiguity between something that seems kind of harmless, you know, textiles, but if you look closer, it has a powerful meaning and presence and story too.
I mean, just to build on that, I was wondering if, you know, because you do talk about weaving as sort of a transformative process, you know, and particularly in terms of the idea of recounting memories, and if there's you know, some kind of a relationship between the idea of or the mechanics of weaving and the act of recounting, you know, where like it's not a very random sort of process of weaving. There's a certain, you know, calculation that goes into making cloth, and if the, you know, the process of making itself also changes with that, you know, the idea of, so what I'm trying to get to is not, you know, what the message on the textile is, but the process of making. Is there something that, you know, there's some kind of a relationship between that and the idea of recounting memories?
Yeah, definitely. I think is also, let's say that textiles are a companion for grief. I mean, for many of these women, when we met them and we visited their homes, you know, their places, and they show us what they had made, the textile that they had made around, like along the story. Textile have been also is a way to do this, but it's also a way to it's a self-care practice too. So it's a way to be with themselves, you know. So it is a repetitive action that allows you. I wouldn't say that it takes away the pain. I definitely think that it helps you to be with the pain, to dwell with the pain, and to somehow allow yourself to process it. So it's in the grieving part is the mourning. Textiles were a very important a very important part of the healing. So for instance, one of them, they said, like, this patchwork is my husband's grief, you know. I just knitted, drink coffee, that was the and cry. So those things, textiles were part of the healing process, of what they had to do to be with themselves.
I mean, just to follow that, so it seems, you know, I mean, the work also showed that a lot of these acts of making are very individual, right? In the sense of individuals, right? And in some sense, the like you say, the idea of reconciliation is personal or individual, but also like what you're trying to do with it is develop some kind of a collaborative collective. So I was wondering if you could speak about how that translation happens from the individual to the collective.
I think it's I would say that even though if you are alone weaving, knitting, embroidering, somehow it is also a collective action. Like sometimes you have many presences when you are crafting a textile. So you have the presence of the person that taught you to embroider, for instance. You have the presence of your friends helping you or listening to you when you were embroidering. You have the idea that you will make this to be part of something too. And these are part, like it seems that it's an individual action, but it is not, because then when you are making it, you are also a part of the collective that is making other pieces. So it is kind of a collectivity that doesn't that keeps individuality, let's say, you know. So every woman in the collective, within the collective, is one, and they have their own troubles, but they are part of something bigger that can relate with what they feel. So it is a kind of a supporting and a caring place to inhabit too.
Right. And can you also tell us, you know, a bit about, so one of the pieces that it shows where the textile speaker, right? Where it's almost like the textile is converted into a digital technology itself. So it's all, it becomes like a speaking device, a listening device, and from say what it, you know, which usually the textile is like becomes almost the act of recounting, or you know, recounting memories, sort of process of healing, but here it's sort of, you know, converted into a different kind of a technology itself to speak out towards someone else, or in the other case where, you know, it sort of activates when a collective has to come together so that energies travel to it. So, and it's a very different way of thinking about digital technology. So I was, I mean, it's not a question, but I was more of just wondering, you know, how did that sort of come about? You know, the idea of thinking with listening devices or sort of speaking devices to use textiles to do that. Yeah.
Well,
And the idea of the spiral itself, the idea of the spiral, like the form of the spiral, like where does that sort of come from? So I was wondering if you could tell us more about it.
Okay, a spiral is a very common shape also in textile sometimes. I mean, if you start a circular crochet, then it's also spiral, and baskets are also, many of the basket, the woven baskets are also based on spirals, and it's also the way that the thinking somehow for them, from some of the communities works. So but it's also one thing that is, textile are also a technology, and textiles are actually the base of digital technology. So if we see the jacquard loom, and before the jacquard loom, the looms before, they are the great grand
Right.
say mothers, parents of computers. So they are not very like far from computers, but we have separated. And it's also because sometimes technology is not related, or digital technology is not related to women, and textiles are more related to women. But when in one of the workshops that we actually help in the like with the communities, we realized that many of them had a close contact with electronics and with electricity, and they were kind of familiar. Many of them were afraid, of course, about electricity, but also they were really open to learn about digital technologies, and so we actually showed them, and we had some workshop with them to teach them how to work with digital components. On the other hand, digital technology, helped us to record the messages in their own voice. That is something really important, because it's not us saying what they want to say or they wanted us to say, but they themselves saying what they wanted to say. And what you will listen to when you listen to the pieces, to the textile pieces, and are the voices actually. They are telling directly what they wanted to say. And sometimes something that I at the beginning of the project, we didn't want to say that we want to give them or to empower them, because we don't think that it's about empowering them, because they have enough power. They are very strong women, that leaders in their communities, and they're very, very strong. But maybe silencing ourselves and listening to them, that is a very different thing.
Right. And so two more things. One is there was this part of the project that you showed where you were where there was questions, and there were these ways of thinking about reconciliation through metaphors, the turtle and the chocolate. So I was wondering how that sort of fits into this work that you're doing. If you could tell us a bit about that.
Sure. I think it's like, if you go through the pieces in the exhibition. So first, for instance, there's one about a traditional soup that is called mondongo, and it is called layer histories, I guess. I don't remember the name of the piece, but then there are two things in them. So we wanted to keep textile logics on the design interaction of the pieces. So that piece, for instance, is applique. So is a layer of fabric above another one and another one and another one. So the logic of the interaction is a textile logic. Yeah. That's the first thing, and it takes time to go through the messages and to find a way to listen to them. And
can you say that again? So the method is textile logic.
Yeah, it's textile logic. So it's the piece that has to, if you want to listen, that you have to go through many layers.
Right. Okay.
And that's one of the pieces, but the theme of the piece, of the textile piece, is about a soup that takes long time to get ready, to get cooked. And first the smell is not very good, but then with time it changes. So the metaphors and the feelings, the emotions, and the senses that we got out of the workshops, we used it as I'm not sure it's the metaphors, but as a material meanings,
Okay.
as processes. So it's, if you go
Right.
through the
Right.
textile pieces, you will find those
Right.
meanings in the stories of the women and in the pieces themselves.
Right. Okay. Okay. And so what it almost seems like, I mean, from where you started the talk to the work that you showed,
Mhm.
you know, that so in the context of Colombia, there's this particular, like you said, meanings that are assigned to what reconciliation means. And it's almost, you know, like the terms of agreement of peace between these big, you know, actors and organizations and bodies. While here, I mean, for it doesn't seem like it almost seems in some sense like I don't know if it's true, but in some sense impossible. It sort of moves along the way to, like you're saying, to mend something new rather than to set what are the terms of reconciliation in that sense. That if the violence is in some sense irreparable, and the, you know, the healing of it through making is a creation of something new that isn't really speaking the language or the terms of you know, what reconciliation means. And I ask this also because, you know, there's a whole conversation in Canada about the, you know, the reconciliation between the indigenous communities and the government about the past, where, you know, and with this round, you know, filmmaking becomes to do that, but it's in some sense striving to sort of repair, and here the notion of repair isn't necessarily so much about repairing relationships, but it's almost like a process of healing, to the healing, you know, self through telling stories to others, without necessarily the person who is the you know, who's conducted the act of violence. And in that sort of a process, there's a whole different meaning of what reconciliation sort of emerges. I was wondering if, you know, what are your sort of, you know, reflections or through this work on what emerges as these meanings of reconciliation?
Yeah, I think is one of the hardest but also the more beautiful things that we found actually is that, I mean, I personally, I wasn't affected directly by the conflict, you know, but when you go and you work with these women, they are full of hope. And they are the ones telling us that they think that it is possible, and that they are very positive. I mean, sometimes that is difficult to be, but they're always aware that they don't want to forget what happened, but to live with it, and to be able to remake themselves somehow, and make their futures. So there's one thing. This is something that Donna Haraway says is about staying with trouble, and staying with trouble doesn't mean to delete, to ignore, or to delete basically the trouble, but stay with it, to acknowledge that it happened, and to acknowledge that it is still there, and that you have to be very careful because it is there, it is somehow active, you know. and
Yeah.
it is always there. So if you see a fabric that is damaged, and then you have to mend it, the damage won't ever go away, and the fabric won't ever be new again. But if you control the damage, and if you mend it, you will see the damage, and it is part of the fabric, and it's a new fabric, it's a different one. Perhaps it is not new, but it's a different fabric.
Right.
So it's a mix between what they know that they can do, because they know that they can transform and they can make the future with the help of the government, of course, and with the help of civilians, of other people, you know, because they definitely have to feel that they are not alone, and they shouldn't be, but it's also about being or having the willingness to remake, to be with the trouble, to stay with it, to dwell with it, and to give it a new meaning with the old one.
Right.
You know?
Right. Okay. No, I mean, it does. So it opens up a lot for us, you know, as in terms of both the kinds of methods that you're working with. As a design school, you know, that for us to think about the methods that you're working with, but also the process of, you know, working with collaboratively with different kinds of collectives. So it does for us sort of open up a different dimension of thinking about, you know, and the notion of care through design, you know, and it gives us a way of thinking about it. So thanks a lot for that. There's one comment from Rupali, who's a colleague and director of the school, who says, thanks for this beautiful presentation. It's not a question, but an observation that it's amazing how textiles and mending and women's roles go across history. So how your work or the work that you showed, you know, reminds her of the work of Chinese women who made these beautiful collages called geba as an act of mending lives during the days of the Cultural Revolution in China. So yeah,
That's
so,
beautiful. Then I have to look for it and yes, and see them with my own eyes. And that is something that I is part of that collective dynamic of textiles. You know, when you go somewhere and then you start talking about textiles, then someone comes and said like, and do you know this? And then my aunt, and then my grandmother, and then my mother made this, and I made this once, you know, and it's somehow a way to connect to because we are always with textiles around, you know, we can't relate, and it's a way to relate. So it also help us to group, to move together.
Yeah, I mean, it's particularly relevant for us. I mean, we're based in Mumbai, which has been sort of the center for textile manufacturing, and which, you know, still exists in multiple ways. One of it is a lot of women who do sort of cheap textile work now, and sort of broken down. So it does for us have that kind of historical element that the work sort of brings out for us. Yeah, definitely,
but because we can, I mean, we can't ignore that textiles have been also a way to control women, to control bodies, and is sometimes, I mean, textile practices and production are very violent with many subalternized communities and bodies. So that's the other part. So is this tension to, you know, something can be very beautiful, but also can be very violent. You know, we are in the same thing. It can be just the opposite, but it can be both in the same.
Yeah, and it also just connects us, the Asias and the Africas and the Americas. So that history of the textile and slavery sort of traveling across these cases. So it does. Thanks a lot, Eliana, for showing us your work, sharing it with us, but also showing those beautiful views and what you're doing with them. All of us are going to spend a lot of time looking at your website, and we'll probably have more questions. And we'll try and continue this conversation in some other format, as we go along. Yeah. If you're ever traveling, do let us know. We'd love to have you work and share work. Yeah.
I would love to go to Mumbai for sure. I think it's one of my dream destinations because I definitely, as a weaver, I definitely have to go there and maybe weave there. Why not?
That'd be
And see
great.
what happens. Yeah, that would be amazing. That's something that I really, really dream of.
Thanks a lot, Eliana.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, everyone, for staying with us, and we'll see you at the next SEA conversation. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.